Testing. Hey, everybody. Get this thing focused. Hey, Photographic Elements, Emotion VFX. Looks like you're here. Thanks for coming, guys. Let me know if the sound's okay. Just going to check if everything's going okay with the stream on your guys' end. Let's see here. Sounds good? Okay, good, great. I'm always worried about the sound because sometimes when I try to replay it and I actually listen to my own stuff to make sure that I'm not rambling too much or being boring. I'm the worst critic of my own stuff. So any changes? What do you mean? I'm using the same mic as I have been. It's a MKE 400 Sennheiser. It's running through an XLR into a USB. So if it wasn't clean before, I would be very sad. Testing to make sure this is all good. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. I have these HyperX Cloud 2s, I think is what they're called. These do not give me, if audio is clipping even slightly, they have like a popping sound. So I never know sometimes if it's the headphones or if it's the audio. So, okay. I'm gonna clean my glasses. It's been one of those days. I have to replace my roof. We have had a monsoon level storms out here. Last week we had it, and I had some leaking in one of my rooms. So luckily it was in a room that has all tile, and the roof in there is it's wood beams. They're all lacquered and everything, but kind of sucks. Yeah, man, I got LaCroix and tea this time because I need tea right now. I am a little low energy. Make sure my door is closed. Yeah, I'm all set. I got my LaCroix and I got my black tea. I'm all ready to go. Yeah, well, the thing is that when we bought the house, we only bought the house a few months ago, and they had just put in the roof not too long ago, but because of the way that the roof was installed, this is something that I've noticed. I don't know if it's this particular area or if it's just being a homeowner, you start to see things. But instead of removing the old roof, it looks like what they did was they just nailed new shingles onto the old onto the old roof. And when I had my insurance guy come out, he's like, yeah, because of the way that they installed it, you're not going to get a warranty. So luckily my homeowner's insurance is going to cover most of 90%, something like that, of the new roof. But being a homeowner is, I'm not going to say it's bad, but you have to know more things. You end up having to follow up on other people doing work in your house that you wouldn't expect. I did not expect to have to double check the work of people who have been doing the same thing for like 20 years. I mean, roofs have been redone, like done and redone and done over and over again for thousands of years. And the idea that someone doesn't know how to do a roof properly at this point is very frustrating. I was talking to my brother, I think it was yesterday or the day before, about DIY projects and how if I was looking for a house again, I would stay away from anything that looked like a DIY project because you never know what they did. So we're going to wait a little bit for some people to come in, as is per the usual. So if you do have questions or anything you want to talk about while we get everything started, please say whatever you'd like. And we will get into the normal beginning portion in a few minutes. Just making sure I got all my notes. Most of my notes are going to be talking, like most of the topics that I have is about this Sony a7S III. And the reason that I'm going to be talking about it a lot is because there were, I guess it was for the past year or so, I've been getting emails and texts and calls and stuff about these Sony products, and the a7S III being the one that has had the most hype and the most speculation. And a lot of those speculations were totally wrong, or predictions. So I think that's kind of funny about it, is that, like, there were people saying, oh, it's going to be 6K and it's going to have like, internal this, and it's going to have, just a bunch of things that they were talking about. And it's not that at all. Some of the things about the a7S III are there, but a lot of it is not that I was seeing as the rumors. And that's why I didn't really talk about it that much before the actual specs were announced. There's a lot of, I don't know what it is, but like, I guess it's just a news thing now where the speculation of things that are not real is more newsworthy than just actually reporting facts. I mean, my YouTube feed would be full of new rumors about the Sony a7S III, and I'm like, I have no interest in that. I don't know why I keep getting it. Yeah, so I'll start with some movies and show stuff. So I guess we had finished out the John Grisham movies, and if you watched the stream last week, I guess like that listing didn't change. We thought this movie, The Lincoln Lawyer, was a John Grisham movie because it popped up like as a John Grisham movie when we looked up all the titles, and it's not. It's by somebody else entirely, and we figured this out very early because it didn't take place in the South, number one, and the look was totally different, and it takes place in California, so I was like, that's different. And it stars Matthew McConaughey, and if you know me, you know that I'm not a huge fan of Matthew McConaughey. I think he one of the things that I find a little bit frustrating is I sometimes can't hear what he's saying. Like, if I don't have subtitles, I can't like understand what he's saying. So it works, like his acting style works really well for me sometimes, and then other times it doesn't work so well. And so we watched Lincoln Lawyer, and I really liked it. I really liked it. I didn't expect that because, again, it's Matthew McConaughey, and I'm just not a huge fan of his. It's just, it's just an acting style that I'm not always happy with because of the technical problem of not being able to hear him. But I really liked him in this role, and we watched it with subtitles, so it was easy. And I would actually really like to see a show with that whole world kind of going on. It kind of reminded me of Better Call Saul, except for the character is totally different. Like Matthew McConaughey's character in Lincoln Lawyer it's almost like a comic book character in the way that he's written. He rides around in a Lincoln, and he has a driver, and he has this backstory that I would like to know more about, and the kinds of characters he defends, and the way that he defends them is really interesting. It's like, if you've seen Better Call Saul and then you watch this, you'll know what I mean. It's like very, very similar, but because the tone is so different, they both work, and they both are their own unique thing. So I was actually really impressed by the movie. I did not expect that. I did not expect to like it at all. So I was very happy with that. So we're gonna have a compliment sandwich situation with movies this week, because the second thing that I'm going to talk about as far as movies or shows are concerned was the Queen Elizabeth movies that I watched with actually one of my favorite actresses, which is Cate Blanchett. I really like her a lot. So she is to me what Jean-Claude Van Damme is to my wife. Like, I will watch anything with her in it. So, I think she's awesome. But and I was thinking, like, she is going to be perfect to play Queen Elizabeth, because there's this look that she has. Because a lot of movies, when it comes to casting, it's not only the way that they play the part, but they have to look like the part. And I think that the way that she looks and the way she holds herself and her face especially works for that character perfectly. When she is in the full like regalia, it's like you couldn't get more stately. And I think she was totally wasted in these movies, because I think the scripts are not too great. The first one, the first Elizabeth one, it was okay. Like, I didn't dislike it, but I also wasn't overly enamored with it. And I think that a big part of what I liked about it was the look and the costume design and that kind of stuff I thought was great. And the kind of ramp up to like the coronation and her actually becoming who she would be as we know her. But there were a few issues that I had with it. The first thing was there was clearly not enough money for the production. There was some really cheap looking stuff in it. And the second thing was, and usually you should shoot around that. Like, you write the script or you shoot around those problems, but they didn't do it like as well as I would have hoped. The second issue is that it's very historically inaccurate. So the thing is that with historically inaccurate historical drama kind of stuff like that, I am willing to let it go. Like, one of my favorite movies, like one of my top 5s, is Braveheart. Love Braveheart. It's very historically inaccurate, but because it's so well made, in nearly every facet, I don't care. Like, I just don't care. I think it's wonderful on its own. And I'm going to use that as a comparison to the second movie, which is Elizabeth, the Golden Age. I despise that movie. And it is because you have this character of history that on their own you could do so much with. And they wasted our time. That's how I feel about that movie. Because I didn't write down how long the scenes were, but they pay way too much attention to Raleigh, who is, I guess there's some kind of historical significance of him as being maybe her lover or something. I know he's in Blackadder. If you've ever seen Blackadder, that character, and the totally different representations. But I could not be more bored with every scene that took place between Elizabeth and Raleigh. I couldn't be more bored. And I don't know why they thought that was so important for the audience to see, when there's so many other things that they could be doing. I also found the representation of the Spanish to be comical and overly simplistic. And it's a shame, because the costume design is just out of this world awesome. It looks fantastic. Like, the entire look of that film is amazing, but that, like, the looks of it doesn't really matter to me as much as how I feel when I'm watching it. If I'm bored, then I'm not going to enjoy it. So if you were to compare to Braveheart, for example, the love interest and the love story part of it is the emotional core, and you need that in your film of some. You need an emotional core of some kind in your movie, but the attention paid to that specific part of it was way too heavy and boring. I hated it. Hated it, hated it. The good thing, and I feel bad saying this, but in Braveheart, that, love story thing happens in the beginning and she dies. So you don't have to deal with that like for the entirety of the film. And there's like, possible thing with the princess, and there's like all these other things. But the bulk of the story is around, the rebellion. It's around, this fight for freedom. It's around all of the politics that Wallace has to play, and all of these different characters. It is not just a constant, scene with just the two love interest characters, and then that's all it is. I mean, that's how I felt through the majority of watching the second Elizabeth movie. I could not stand it. I got very frustrated, and I wanted to turn it off. So I don't know why they did that, but it was, in my opinion, it was a very poor decision to write the story that way. And that also falls on, in my opinion, it falls on the director and it falls on the lead characters, because you need to have that pushback. If as a director, this isn't going to work as a storytelling device, you need to give pushback, and you need to go, okay, this isn't going to work. We need to put more stuff in. And what it felt like was they spent so much time with this boring love story idea that they completely forgot about all of the other things that Elizabeth did during the Golden Age. And they rushed through a bunch of things. And then it was also historically inaccurate. So there was a bunch of things that were just kind of like glommed on. It was almost like a love story mainly, which was totally not needed. And then they glommed all this like stuff with a war that really wasn't a thing, and the intrigue was also missing. Like there wasn't enough court intrigue, which is my thing. So I was very disappointed, very, very disappointed in both movies. Second one far more than the first one. Yeah, I know the thing about Mel Gibson not being a great person, but it doesn't mean that the movie's bad. It's kind of a weird situation that I have sometimes with art, because if you go back and look at artists, many different types, you're going to find some really bad skeletons. His are more obvious because he's here right now, and he's like on tape or whatever saying horrible things. But Braveheart's a good movie, so it's hard to like. I'm able to separate those things a bit more than some people, but I can understand why you might not like it. Yeah, and if you don't want to support anybody like that, that's just totally fine. I mean, the last copy that I have of Braveheart was, I think, before I knew any of that stuff. But I mean, it is what it is. It's not not apologizing for his behavior. It's just I can understand when there's a good movie and when there's not. Like Chinatown's a good movie. The director is not a good person. So that's that. And then the big awesome thing is that there's new episodes of Norseman. I have been waiting for new episodes of Norseman for long enough, and we finally have Norseman. So I am very excited. We have to actually rewatch a bunch of the old ones to get refreshed on what's going on in the story. And it's still great. Even second time through, hilarious show. Couldn't recommend it enough. Yeah, and I guess like it shot, if I remember correctly, they shot it in two different ways. They shot it in the native language, which I believe is Norwegian, and then they have the second, which is in English. We're watching the English version, and I love it. I think it's wonderful, and it's about 30 minutes. It's about 30 minutes per episode, which is perfect length for each episode for that kind of story. What I love about that show is that they have no problem making fun of their history, and they have this really interesting way of taking the horribleness of the things that like the Vikings were doing and making it feel commonplace within their world. And it's an experience. Like it's the kind of comedy I really, really like. It feels sometimes almost like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where like none of the characters are really nice people. They're all pretty terrible in their own ways. But yeah, it's hilarious nonetheless. And I love their setups to jokes. They'll have like a really, really long segment of someone saying something, you know, to set it up that something horrible is going to happen to them. And then finally it does happen. And it's just, it's like a wind up toy. The more you wind it up, the better the joke gets on the end. Yeah. Let's look through here. Right check. Matthew would take his shirt off in every movie, and also Kate Hudson. True Detective. Yeah. Yeah, I know that about Matthew McConaughey. I don't care about the, you know, taking off your shirt or whatever. It's just like, I can't hear what he's saying most of the time. And it's like his acting style. Like there was a car commercial that he was in. It's like, that's how he talks normally in the movie season. And it's just kind of like, I don't know what it is. It's just, I'm not a big fan of that. So yeah, True Detective. I don't remember. I don't think I watched that. I don't think I watched True Detective. Yeah, Kate Blanchett. Yeah, I love Kate Blanchett. I love her in everything. I love her in everything. I don't like every movie she's in. Yeah, I can understand if you don't support Mel Gibson. That's fine. I don't watch his modern post-crazy movies. I don't think I've seen a lot of his movies, like modern films. I don't know if he's doing any. I did see Apocalypto, and I hated it. And I was actually talking to my wife because we were watching Norseman, and I was thinking, wouldn't it be nice to have, like, I've never seen a show done or movies done about the Aztecs or the Mayans or the Incas or like, you know, the people of those tribes, and then somebody try to find as much history as they can and try to tell a story that normalizes their culture in that way, kind of like how Norseman does it. It could be either comedy or drama, I don't care, but I've never seen one with like any of those other cultures. And I think that, you know, people in South America, like creators there, should be doing those. Like they should be the ones to do it for new products. But I would love to see that. I don't know if there's stuff in the works for that. But I'd love to see something like that. If anybody has some movies that they've seen or shows that exist that are like that are with those cultures, I would love to see it. I've read quite a few books about them since school that doesn't really go into a lot of their cultures, and I'm very intrigued by some of the things that they used to do. Like researching the Aztecs is very interesting. So I'd love to see that. Yeah, I mean, I've never seen it before. It would be totally new to me. Yeah. I love movies, but as a Jewish person, I just cannot support them. I understand, Mike. I totally understand. Yeah, Weinstein. Yeah, I understand. Weinstein, it's like, I have a hard time with it. Like, I like movies that are done by Weinstein Company, and it's like, can't, you know, it's like movies versus, like, I know that there are people who are horrible people. It's like, you know, if you've ever looked at what happened to child actors, and the horrible people that worked with them, you may not be inclined to watch any of the movies that had like some of those other child actors that you might really love, just because of the way that they were being treated. So it's awful. I mean, unfortunately, this part of the culture that they have in Hollywood is these horrible things. Lots of horrible people. So it's really hard. No, I did not see True Detective. I don't remember why. I don't remember why I haven't seen that. I don't remember. Yeah, I watched the at the time that I was thinking of seeing True Detective, I was in the middle of The Wire, and then when I was done watching The Wire, I didn't want to watch another like that kind of thing. So like The Wire was really really good too. So I don't know. I don't know why I haven't seen it. So I'll have to go and look at why I haven't seen True Detective. The Mission. What is The Mission? Photographic Elements. I would like to know what that is. If I'm telling you guys, if you have shows or movies that are, especially if they're made by South American creators, because they should know more about the culture than I do from the United States. I would love to see movies or shows with that, even if they're not the best quality as far as the production value. I would love to see it just to see what kind of stories they tell within that world. I'd really like to see it. So yeah, Powell, we are going to be talking about the Sony A7S III. So yeah, Arrested Development's really good. I like the original series. I tried to watch the newer one, and I'm somebody who has a really hard time with like if I liked an old thing and then someone does a new thing and it's not the same thing, I get a little perplexed by it, or I don't immediately kind of respect it, or I don't not respect it, but I don't accept it initially because the thing that see, I'm going to tell you this, Photographic Elements. The reason why I'm not sure if I want to watch something like that is because that's about people of another culture going to save people of a completely different culture. Not a big fan of that kind of thing. It's a very deeply personal thing to me about that kind of story, and I have a hard time with it. If you've watched a lot of old, if you've watched a lot of the old, like I'm talking about from like as early as film was ever a thing, the really old documentaries that they do of like the bush tribes in Africa and stuff like that, you would understand why I feel the way I do. I'm not really a big fan of those kinds of movies, generally. How about stereoanamorphic lenses? I understand Photographic Elements. I understand. That's why I think the movie has to be done by people who are like of that area or that culture to try to write a story that does not involve. Because usually, what happens with something like that, if it's like a story written by people who aren't even a part of it, it'll be about someone who's of a different group going in and saving these people. That's usually what happens, and I don't want to. I'm not interested in that kind of story. I understand. I wasn't picking on you or anything. That's not the kind of thing I'm talking about. Stereoanamorphic lenses about the 50 millimeter, and now they are coming out with a 35. I don't really shoot anamorphic, so I couldn't tell you. I would be a bad person to ask about it. I don't really see the point, but some people like that look. If you like that look, go for it. It's not my thing because I don't really shoot that kind of content that would need it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about here is I just want to talk about trolling on this channel. So every time that I make a video that gets over 1,000 views within about a week or two, usually it's like within the first day or two, it'll hit like 1,000 hits. What happens is that people that are not really used to this channel start chiming in with their opinions. I don't have a problem with that, but what I do have a problem with is viewpoints that are not being respectful of other people. I don't care if you're arguing with somebody else's opinion on something. I don't mind that. Like if you have an opinion that is different than mine or different than somebody else's in the comment section, I don't really care. Like that's all, I actually want you guys to kind of talk about this stuff, because often what happens is that we get kind of caught in our own little bubble and we don't think about how other people might use something, and we can all learn by talking about it. Okay. Like, for example, if I was to say, hey, I'm not really a big fan of autofocus because it's so unreliable, do, and someone says, well, here's my experience. I did this test. Why don't you check this out? I find it very reliable in these situations. And then, I go and I test it out myself, and I might find that it totally works the way that they say. And then I have something that I can add as a possibility if I ever need a piece of gear for that situation. What I'm not okay with is attacking people. Okay. You don't need, if you have a disagreement, and this isn't general, okay, this is a general thing. If you have a disagreement with somebody, there is no reason for you to attack the person as an individual. Okay. That's the kind of thing that I do not tolerate, because it just has no place here. My channel is a place where we can talk about that stuff, and we don't have to attack each other as human beings. There's no reason for that. Okay. Having your opposing viewpoint is always okay. Being a jerk to other people is just not. This includes things like telling other people to shut up because you don't like their opinion. I don't tolerate that kind of thing, because, I'm allowing on my space for people to talk. Okay. And I'm open to having their opinions. You telling them to shut up is not very nice. And you shouldn't need, if that's how you feel, that other people need to shut up so that your opinion is more important for some reason, like you're allowed to talk, but other people aren't allowed to talk. You need to reevaluate your own self, because you're basically saying that only your opinions are important and people who oppose your opinion aren't important. Okay. So, you can have an opposing viewpoint. You can give your opinion. I don't care if it's opposed to mine or not. I really don't. Like, I've had people disagree with me on this channel, and we have a conversation back and forth. And we don't, like, if me and the other person are being respectful of each other as people, we learn a little bit about each other, and we learn about how other workflows are. Usually it's just a workflow disagreement, or it's a personal experience disagreement. Like, I can't argue with you about your personal experience. It's impossible. I'm not going to know what it's like to be in your shoes. All we can do is try to, like, talk through these things. And, there's nothing on this channel that I'm going to talk about really that's going to physically harm you or is going to emotionally harm you. And if you're having emotional harm because of someone else's opinion, again, that I feel like that's something you need to figure out for yourself. Okay. So if you don't know how to be nice, okay, or if you're asking yourself, like, am I one of these people? First, ask yourself, am I attacking someone's person? Like, am I attacking them personally, or am I attacking their opinion? If you're attacking their opinion, chances are you're not being a jerk about it. If you're attacking that person personally and saying they are stupid for having an opinion that's different than yours, yeah, you're attacking the person. Okay. Second, am I being aggressive or assertive yet respectful? If you're being aggressive, swearing at people and that kind of stuff, you're probably being very aggressive. You can be assertive and be respectful at the same time. This is something that you learn if you work with a lot of people. You can be a leader, or you can be a leader of opinion, or you can, state how you feel about things and be assertive and be direct without being a jerk about it. Okay. And you can respect people doing that. And the last thing, like, am I being logical or am I being emotional? I don't think there's anything wrong with being emotional about things, but if you're being emotional about something like, if you're talking about politics, I totally get why there's emotion involved in that. Okay. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about cameras and lenses and that kind of thing. Not really, like, I don't really understand that. And when I get annoyed and I get emotional, it's usually when people are being very disrespectful. So, just so you understand. And my attempt, even when I make a video that is in response to this kind of stuff, I'm trying to attack the opinion of the person. Okay. And I will, if someone is being disrespectful to me, I'll probably do the same thing back, because I'm not really like, I don't know, like sometimes I feel like people need to be told, like, if that's the only way that they know how to communicate, then you need to give it to them back sometimes. Like, I know for some people, like they'll say, oh, well, if a bully bullies you at school, you just talk them through it. Now, when I was a kid and I was being bullied, the way to stop it was to punch them back in the face. So, if you just keep getting walked on, then, if you let people just walk all over you, then they'll continue to do that. So the way that I'm going to deal with trolls is I'll probably just, shut you down pretty quickly. If you can't behave, then you will not have the privilege of commenting on the channel. And I might even make a video telling you how wrong you are, in the most respectful way that I can to people who are being bullies. So that's how I'm going to do it. So usually I don't have to do that kind of thing, but that's how I do it. So, okay. Yeah. So I'll open up if you guys want to talk about that kind of thing, and how you feel about it, you let me know. But it's just not something that I'm going to tolerate, is being a jerk to each other on this channel. Okay. Let's look in before we get into the A7S III, let's look in here. Mike, you're asking, what do I think of the Siriu lenses? I honestly couldn't tell you. I don't really have an opinion on anamorphic lenses. I just don't shoot that kind of stuff. Like, my narrative days are all but behind me now. So unless with COVID, like I thought before COVID hit, of where I am currently, either going into or creating a group to work on that kind of stuff. When you have, like, your family and I take care of my dog like my kids, so because I spoil them. But when you're working on a lot of projects that have nothing to do with narrative, finding the time to do that kind of stuff is a little, it's hard to find. Like I have a regular day job where I'm working in video production, and then on my side stuff, I'm working on video production. In fact, I have a project that may be coming that'll be really, really interesting, working with a high profile client. So that would be really cool if we actually ended up getting it, which is not gotten through a reel, by the way. It would be, as I tell you guys, if you're a follower of this channel, I tell you that word of mouth and your personality and who will take you farther than anything any other person will probably tell you. Who when it comes to production is way more important than a reel or a website or any of that stuff. So, and the only reason why I'd be getting this job is because of who I know, honestly. So anyway, so I mean, that's a thing. And then when you look at it, it's like when I'm doing narrative, like the last time that I did narratives that were independent kind of films, dude, that sucked a lot of my life away. I probably lost 5 years of my life force making those, because it took a lot of work. There was no money. We funded it ourselves, and it was fun. And I really like how one of them came out, considering how much money we had to get everything done. And we were actually working with some people who, like, some people were really good at their skills, and some other people we had to actually teach, like the boom op. We had several different boom ops, and audio people that were, and there were some other people that were like kind of like showing up and then just leaving. So when you get into the narrative side of things, which is where more of the anamorphic stuff starts to come in, it's just, to me, it's just more work. Like, I work in it on the regular day job, And then for side business stuff, I do more work in video production. And then on the side for my fun stuff, sometimes like I just want to unwind. And in that case, I'll usually play a video game that will stress me the hell out anyway. So it probably doesn't even matter. Or watch shows or the other things. Like, I mean, if I could have a full-time job of just watching shows and giving critical analysis, then I probably would be more apt to or more interested in doing more narrative. But I just don't have the time right now, and to me it's more work. So what do I shoot mainly? When I am shooting, it's anything for learning videos. So right now with COVID, kind of have relaxed on the shooting side of it. I do mostly post-production, so doing color editing, doing video editing. I produce learning content for a company, and in that learning content, it's usually helping with script writing or editing scripts, creating storyboards, doing the actual edits, that kind of thing. So like for one of the projects that we did, there was in the script, they were talking about a story about a tadpole that turns into a frog, and then it's talking to the tadpole. And so I had this idea to do an animation, and we had to do it like really, really quick turnaround. And DJ from DJ Tutorials created an awesome animation for them. They were really, really happy with it. So that's the kind of stuff that I do right now, mostly learning content, and that market is booming. Okay, like if you're not getting into learning content, you really need to get into it. Probably the bigger side of it is actually doing editing for lectures and facilitating what's the right way to say it? I guess consultation for how people can improve their production value of just this kind of thing, doing Zoom stuff or doing live streaming or conferences. There's a conference that my wife showed me where they actually created a whole 3D setup of the conference center. And then you click on different things to go into different rooms. So like, since the doctors can't go to actual conference centers anymore because of COVID, they have these digital ones. And so if there's a conference happening in room A, you would click on room A, go in there. So the channel is buffering so much it's difficult to watch. Well, I've got a version of it on my end here. I'm not seeing this buffering issue. So is anybody else having buffering issues? If you are, let me know. I'm not sure what I could do to fix it, but yeah. So yeah, if anybody else is in here seeing buffering issues, please let me know. I'm gonna check on another source, see if I'm seeing buffering. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm not seeing any buffering even on my phone. So I'm not sure what the issue is. Let me see here. Oh yeah, I'm seeing it now. Anybody else in the chat having buffering issues with my video, please let me know so I can see if I can do anything with it. Because otherwise, I won't know if it's one person or everybody. Let me see here. Fix buffer issue with live stream on YouTube. Flashing, lagging, or buffering. Adaptive bitrate streaming. Keep bandwidth under 1 Mbps. Maintain higher upload speed. Yeah, I'm not sure, man. Couldn't tell you. Couldn't tell you what the issue is. It's fine over there. Okay. All right, man. I'm gonna keep going then, because if there's an issue, I'm not sure what the problem is. So, all right. Let's see. All right, so we're gonna move into the A7S3 discussion. Unfortunately, we only have, I guess, 2 people left. So I guess there was some kind of spike, maybe. But let's get into this A7S3 stuff anyway. Okay, so let me just open up the spec page. I had it open, but I closed it just in case that was the buffering problem that people were talking about. But let's look at this A7S3 spec sheet. Of course, the top ones are not from Sony themselves, from other people. Here we go. Let's see. Electronics, cameras, ILCs, cameras, A7S3 with Pro Movie still capability. That's a weird name for it. Okay, so A7S3. I'm going to do this rundown. I'm pretty sure most of you who have looked at it know what it is, but anyway, here's their big thing. 4K 120p, or 100, I guess, if you're PAL, 422 10-bit all-intra. ISO goes from 40 to 409,600. 4K HDR. 5-axis steady shot inside instead of outside the body. Bions XR, don't have any idea what that means. So let's look at this. Large pixels deliver high sensitivity and low noise. Again, if you're familiar with this channel, I've talked about this before, that kind of thing, when you actually compare to higher res sensors, it's actually kind of, there's not a case where it's always one way or the other. Sometimes if you shoot a really, really high res image, it will be cleaner, sharper, have more dynamic range than a lower megapixel sensor. It's all dependent on the technology, and it's usually not 1:1. So that kind of thing, I can't really agree with that. So it's like, high sensitivity and low noise compared to what? Anyway, their Bions image processors faster. The big thing about this that I wanted to point out, the smaller megapixel sensor. The thing about it is that this should allow for a faster readout. Like, you'll notice that the higher the megapixels on a sensor, usually the worse the rolling shutter tends to be. So this should make it, and I think that this is, in the tests that I've seen, the camera has a faster readout than a lot of other cameras. And that's really good, and it's probably to do with that lower pixel count. So that's probably more of the reason why it's like that. I don't know about this high sensitivity, low noise thing. It's like, it depends. Autofocus performance, from what I've seen, the AF looks pretty good. More importantly than it being fast is that it's accurate, and that when it's changing the focus points, that it doesn't kind of jump. The problem with the Fuji cameras that I've seen, and why I never use autofocus with any of my Fuji cameras with video, is because the autofocus kind of jumps around. When you see it like where the bokeh is kind of snapping, it's very distracting. If you look at that compared to the Sony eye autofocus, which is now from my perspective on par with the dual pixel autofocus for video that Canon has, it has this smoothing that they add where people call it more organic, but I don't know if that's the word. It's just like a smoothing algorithm with it that makes it not so snappy. With still photos, you want it to snap into focus real fast. And most cameras are built for that with autofocus, and that's why they don't work so great for video. But with the dual pixel autofocus, with the way that they have the algorithm set out for video, makes it really nice and smooth. And it looks like the Sonys are doing the same thing. They've been getting better and better and better and better with it. So it looks a lot better now than I've seen. The touch autofocus with it, if you watch the Gerald Undone video, which is my recommended video for the Sony a7S III, even when I make my own about it, I'm still going to say Gerald Undone's is better than mine. Okay. His is the kind of video that I like. Dry, no BS. And, he doesn't feel the need to do like a cine reel for himself with the camera. That's what I really like about him. And the way he does it is it's very, he gets in on the details on what he likes about something and why, and uses a lot of facts to back these things up and not just the images. My opinion, while we're still on this, for a lot of people who have sent me videos that are like, oh, look at the Sony, I like this about it, I don't like this about it, and are talking about the picture, it's really hard for me to watch any of those reels with any kind of, I don't know, interest, because when I'm looking at the camera, I want to know what the specifications are, how well it works, for what they're trying to sell, and that kind of stuff. As far as the image quality, people have been able to get good images out of cameras that are 15 years old. If you can't get a decent image out of the Sony, then it's broken. Okay. And the reality is that usually those cine reels are more of a testament to the filmmaker themselves more than it is the camera. Okay. Because if the camera sucks with autofocus and it took you like 100 tries to get the one shot that was in focus, well, you're not really going to see that in the cine reel. You're going to see the one that they got that was in focus most likely. So it's not really a good indicator of anything. And usually the picture quality or the color science, you can't tell anything of that based on what you're seeing from people's little reels that they made. So I'm not trying to downplay reels. It's just not really important to me when I'm looking at a camera. The more important stuff with this, the 10-bit internal recording in H.264, if I'm not mistaken. They have the all intra that's at, I believe it's 600 megabits per second, which I believe is around 75 megabytes a second. So you're going to need fast cards that can go into your internal media cards, which is great. Okay, so that's great. So that I think is the single best thing that they did with the camera as far as like the image is just having a 10-bit, proper all intra kind of encoding. That works. It's not ProRes, it's not DNX HDR, it's not Blackmagic RAW, but all intra is good. The GH5 had, I think it was a 400 megabits per second all intra encoding. Worked great for a lot of people. They had no issues with it other than when they shot something completely wrong. So, this will probably serve the same kind of purpose. Not as much stretch as like a 12-bit file or like a Blackmagic RAW or any other RAW file. But yeah. So, and it also has a lot of like higher compression. So you can do like really, really highly compressed, like 8-bit files if you want to, which is great. Renowned sensitivity delivers expanded ISO 409,600. I will never use that, so maybe you guys will. I have no idea. So that's pretty awesome if it works. If you're a super low light shooter, I know that I think it was Planet Earth 2. I think it was for that they used the A7Ss in those caves where there was like really no light at all. So this would be great for that kind of stuff. The slog stuff, like slog, a lot of people have a hard time working with, so you'll just have to kind of deal with it. But if you use Resolve, you should be able to work with it a lot easier, and I'll explain that later. Hybrid log gamma, I haven't really done a lot of stuff with that, so I again, that's like an HDR thing, which I'm really interested in. This is a weird thing. So it says the new Bion's XR image processing engine delivers improvements in color reproduction and stability against different light sources, a natural tonal degradation and roll off, and reduced rolling shutter. So as far as color reproduction, it's probably just that they changed how the ones and zeros are encoding things, but stability against different light sources is really interesting. I would like to see if they dealt with some of the issues that they were having with like blue. I know the Sonys are notorious for having issues with like LEDs, like blue lights, stuff like that. So I'd be really interested to see if they did something with that, or if that's what they mean. So I would imagine that if you like the natural Rec 709 transform that you get out of like the Sony Venice, I'm pretty sure this is doing the same thing. 16-bit raw HDMI output. I'll talk about that a little bit later. It's nice to have that. And this is what's weird. There's this Sony Atom X in the image. In fact, while I'm talking about this, I'll just give you guys the link. So it's not like I'm talking into a void and you can look at it with me. 16-bit raw HDMI. I've never seen the Sony Atom X thing that they have on here. I'm going to look at it real quick. Sony Atom X external. Never seen this before. What is this thing? SSD for Atomos. Let's see. That's an SSD, but what is that thing? What is that? Just the SSD? Or is it I think it's just a drive. Yeah, I think it's just a drive. I thought when I first saw this, I thought that this was like a Sony external recorder that they were making for this. And it looks like it's just a drive. Never seen that before. So I guess you can use that. Efficient editing through proxy recording. I've got to be honest about this. So this thing here, it says, while recording high bitrate 4K movies, HD proxies in 8 or 10-bit depth can be generated in camera. There's a little thing here. It says, proxy recording is not available in the following conditions. A normal recording, frame rate of 120p or higher. S&Q movie recording of 120p or higher. S&Q movies at frame rate of 120, 100 FPS or higher. So I think this is weird. I mean, unless you want the proxies for any other reason, I'm not sure why you would need these for editing, because computers are pretty fast now. Like unless you have like a really, really old computer that you haven't updated at all, your computer should be able to deal with this. And personally, even if you get like the H.265 files, like I wouldn't even do the H.265 recordings. I would shoot it in the all-intra H.264 if I was being honest. That's the kind of thing that I would use. I'm not sure if this proxies thing is really going to be useful for me. Maybe if you're somebody who needs like a backup and you think proxy will be enough, that's fine. But usually that's not enough for a proper delivery anyway. So I just don't know about that. Maybe I just haven't shot with cameras that need that. But I have no problem editing 4K, and I don't think people are struggling that much with 4K editing right now. So maybe I'm talking out of my butt, but I just don't think people are struggling that much. Maybe that would have been nice like 5 years ago, but I don't think that's such an issue anymore. So then they have a bunch of marketing stuff. So the big thing for me on this is the autofocus is really good. They have the stabilization, which is, some people like it, some people don't. They have this digital audio interface for clear sound recording. That's a weird thing. So I think that's worth looking at. I remember reading about how they were integrating that into the shoe. So maybe that will get around the complaint that some people are having that the camera doesn't have an XLR input, which is not a standard thing on cameras like this. Like, I don't know of a single DSLR or SLR type mirrorless camera that has an XLR input, that like a full size XLR input, that isn't something like the Blackmagic cameras. They have the mini XLR, but I don't know, like that's the only one that I've seen that really has that. So I saw a complaint about that and I was like, I don't know what you're complaining about. Like what they have on there is pretty standard, but this little recorder thing looks interesting. I don't know if I would use it, but for broadcast, hey DJ, for if you're doing news gathering, this looks like a really cool little unit. I've never used it, so I have no idea how good it is or how reliable it is, but it looks like a cool unit. I would imagine that this would be great for a little news gathering unit. Movie shooting comfort. I think that's weird. I don't know what that means. But if you've shot movies or shot video before, handheld video like this is not comfortable regardless. So to be honest, if it's not like the kind of, if it's not like a shoulder mount rig, it's probably not going to be comfortable anyway. So I guess it's like they move the movie button and stuff like that. It's like, that's fine. But for shooting movies, I just don't see how that's going to be that relevant. Let's see here. Okay, so a bunch of stuff, and there's like, a whole page. I'm not going to go through every little thing on the page. I'm going to go over my highlights now on this thing. Highlights, it'll basically be like highlights, lowlights, my thoughts, all that kind of stuff. So while I bring that up, I'm going to get some LaCroix ready. DJ, you missed when I was complimenting you for your frog animation. Also, DJ, I didn't give any specifications on the possible project that we're looking at, but one of the things that I've said on this channel a lot is about how the way that, in my opinion, the way that you get work, more than having a website or having a reel or having a portfolio or any of those things, is word of mouth. And that will usually get you work a lot easier, a lot faster, and you'll get better work that will pay you better based on the connections that you build. So, there's a possible project that you and I were talking about that's for a high profile client. How did you get word of that? Was it because someone saw a reel? Was it because, like, what was the reason? Was it just because you knew certain people? Like, how did you even get word of it? So while DJ is going to write his response there, hopefully, yeah, a guy. That's exactly right. Like, you guys, some of you guys think I'm crazy. I don't have a website, but I get work anyway because of word of mouth. And DJ, same thing. Like, if you know people, you'll get work. It's the easiest way to do it. Working your butt off on making a real piece or whatever will not go nearly as far as getting to know people. I promise you. Okay. So highlights, I'll go over the highlight stuff. So this will be kind of like a whole run through this. I'll try to go into the comments. Please comment as I talk about this, because this is really all I'm going to talk about and the context of it with this camera for most of the stream. And I want you guys to voice your opinions. I don't, you can agree with me, not agree with me, whatever. If you don't say anything, it'll just be me talking and it might be a little boring. So, okay. So the first thing, the 10-bit all intro recording for me is a real winner. And in my opinion, for cameras like this, it's the standard. Okay. I think that cameras that are these small DSLR kinds of cameras really need to have, for it to be even relevant, in my opinion, for video production, it needs to have 10-bit all intra. If it doesn't at least have that, it needs to have like ProRes or DNX HD, HR, or internal. This is all internal, or internal Blackmagic RAW, or something similar. If it doesn't at least have that today, if you release a camera that's supposed to have video features that are a main thing in it, and you're charging as much as Sony is for this kind of product, and you don't at least have that, I don't think anyone should buy your camera. Okay. When I saw the release of the FS5 Mark II, I was like, what the hell? Okay. So this kind of thing to me is, if it's not there, in my opinion, it's not really worth your time as a video production person, because 8-bit 420 is, okay, we know now that 8-bit 420 is, I'm not going to say obsolete. There's reasons for it, but for the kinds, even low budget production, I would expect someone to deliver to me some kind of decent quality 10-bit files that are in log, okay? Because I want to be able to have enough information to adjust the shots in post. This is me talking as a producer, okay? I don't like baking stuff in to things that I have to work with, okay? So, and I've seen complaints about this already. You know, people complaining that it's only 10-bit all intra, and it's, you know, it's not ProRes, it's not DNxHR, it's not, you know, it's not good enough, it's not BRA. Okay, so I get that, and there's other cameras that can do those things, but for what I think the target is for this kind of camera, it will work out beautifully. With the GH5, people use that, even though it wasn't great in low light, for weddings and corporate stuff and commercials, all kinds of productions. And it worked really, really well with the kind of codec it had. With this, assuming that the codec that they used and the color profiles and the gammas and all those things don't break the image, which I don't think it will. They spent long enough developing it, so I'm pretty sure that they got all their ducks in a row. It will be really great for the same kinds of stuff that you might have been shooting with, like an A7 III, GH5, A7R, any of the Nikon cameras, any of the Canon DSLRs, any of that kind of stuff. That includes weddings, corporate videos, and the travel films that I see. I don't see any reason that if you're doing the travel stuff to need something like the Pocket 4K or the Pocket 6K, to be honest. I don't think you really need that. This camera, like if you're doing that kind of thing, I really do think that this new camera would make more sense. Simply because it will do enough for the kind of product that you're making. If you're making high-end kind of travel stuff, then that's a totally different animal. That's a totally different beast. I wouldn't know then. But for a lot of the stuff that I see, okay, that is going to be hitting consumers that are not going to care so much about it being like this huge, elaborate, wonderful thing. It needs to be good enough, which is to me the optimal quality. It needs to be good enough to get the grade. This should work. And especially with stuff like weddings or events, it should work really, really well. I've already seen a lot of weddings that were shot with the A7 III and a lot of events. And the complaints that the people I know that use that camera, this A7S III should completely deal with all of those issues that people had. So, and especially if it's as good in low light as what I think it would be, for especially weddings, it would be great, because one of the problems with any wedding is the lights. You can't just bring in lights. It's not going to really work. Like when people are on the dance floor for weddings, and I've been to enough, and I dance at every single wedding for the rest of the night, you never know what kind of lighting situation you're going to be in. And I'm always thinking, like with the videographers that are there, how the hell are they going to do it? Nobody, when they're on the dance floor, really wants to have a light in their face from your camera. So if this thing is pretty good for that, this will be a real winner in that market, I think. So yeah, and having that like in-body stabilization, or if it really works well for whatever lens you put in front of it, will probably work really well for that kind of thing. The battery life looks really, really good. Gerald and Dunn did a video, and he said it had about 2 hours. He said it had about 2 hours of battery life at 4K running at 60p continuous until it ran out of juice, which is awesome. So that's really good battery life for something that's doing what it's doing. It has a faster readout, which means that you'll have less rolling shutter artifacts. Again, citing the Gerald Undone video, he shows the difference. And it's like that kind of thing. For me, rolling shutter, if you're doing lockdown shots, not really important. But for handheld video, which I think this is really made for, it will work really nice for that. The higher dynamic range is really nice. The only thing is that, you know, the amount of stops, like they're advertising, I think it was 15 stops of dynamic range. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's between 14 and 15, I believe. The thing is that when you see that, keep in mind that really numbers like this only matter when they matter. I think I've talked about it before, where if you're shooting in a situation where there's only like 10 stops of dynamic range, having all this extra is not really going to do that much for you. I've seen more than enough comparison studies and done my own between cameras that have like 2 to 3 stops higher dynamic range between the two cameras. And really, you only see the difference in certain situations where, you know, in one of them, you'll have a blown out light source, and the other one, it won't look as blown out. Or in, you know, if you're in an exterior, you'll see more in the shadows without clipping the highlights than you would in the other camera. But if you're shooting in like a controlled situation, if you're shooting a lot of controlled situations, that extra dynamic range isn't going to matter as much. It's just not. When you can control the lights, the dynamic range is like, it is important. I'm not going to say it's not important, but the more you control your light sources and the more you control the illumination on your subjects and your ratios, the less this kind of thing really matters. So just keep that in mind. So if you feel bad because your camera has like 1 or 2 stops less, it probably won't really matter that much. So yeah, the autofocus, from what I've seen, looks pretty good. What they did was they added like, it looked like a ramping effect, going to different focus points. So that will help it to not look so snappy, which is good. And in my opinion, if you're shooting with this camera and you're trying to get like that super shallow depth of field that I'm seeing from people who want a camera like this at like f1.4 to f2, you're going to have to use and rely on that autofocus, because otherwise, you know, your subject moves even slightly and it's out. Especially if you're using really sharp glass that has that that paper thin depth of field, and then if the fall off is really sudden. A lot of Sigma lenses are like that, by the way. But if you're, I think that there's the Otis lenses are like that too, where there's just not much of a gradual fall away from whatever's in focus. You really, really need to have autofocus to help with that. Trying to focus like an 85 millimeter lens at f1.4 on a moving subject is impossible. Like for me manually, it's just impossible. So you will need autofocus, I believe, in order to get it to work, especially if you're doing a handheld. Forget about it. And the thing about this too is that if you buy the camera, you need to make sure that the lenses that you get actually are going to work with these features. One of the things that I find really interesting is that people will buy like a camera that has these great features and then not use it to its full advantage. So if something has autofocus, but the lens you have does not really work great with that autofocus system, or it has like a certain kind of motor that doesn't work well with it, then you're not really going to get that full benefit. Okay. So you'll probably have to test your lenses if you're doing this. I already said the thing about low light. Another thing, there's no reported overheating that I've seen with it, which is pretty big, because if you're familiar with what's going on with the backlash to Canon about their newest cameras, this is not that great, that there's overheating in their cameras. But with this one, from what I'm seeing, they don't really have that issue. And from what I saw, they redesigned the in-body stabilization, not the, maybe it's not the mechanism, but it's like a heat sink that's behind it or near it or whatever. And it looks like that is probably taking care of the issue. And I would wager that's probably what took them so long to engineer, and why it took so long to come out. Because I think they knew to do whatever it is that they were trying to do, they were going to have to develop a new way to engineer their product to allow the 10-bit kind of recordings to happen without this overheating issue that kind of plagued their cameras. My thoughts on in-body stabilization is that I don't like it for video. I don't like it for video. I've never had a good experience with it for video. And part of that is because mechanical stabilization or manual stabilization maybe is the right word, but using a tripod, using a monopod, using, a stabilizer, like a Steadicam, for example, these kinds of things to me produce much better quality compared to in-body stabilization. And lens stabilization I don't like either, but I actually have not had as many issues with lens stabilization as I have with in-body stabilization. With in-body stabilization, I've seen some really wacky things that I do not like. So I actually like it better for photos, which is opposite of what I've seen some other people talk about. So a weird kind of complaint I've heard about this is that with IBIS, what it does is it makes like manufacturers get lazy with lens design by not adding lens stabilization. I don't agree with that. I just don't agree with that it's lazy. I think it's just that, in my opinion, is that your lenses need to last a long time because they can usually be used on a bunch of different things, whereas a camera you'll probably replace every few years. So one of the things is that with a lens design, the more stuff you put in, like image stabilization and autofocus and like a bunch of things in it, the more stuff can break. I would rather have it where if I wanted stabilization, that it was in the body, as long as it gave me similar results. That's my opinion, because that way I have less likelihood of my lens breaking because of the stabilization. I actually had it where the issues with two of the Canon lenses I've had were on the stabilization and nothing else. So there's that. And I understand why people like in-body stabilization for video, especially if they do handheld video with like vintage glass. And you guys already know how I feel about vintage glass. But it's just not my thing. I totally understand why people like it. It's just not my thing for video. Photo is fine, but not for video. HDMI out for RAW. So with the HDMI situation, here's the thing. Like Sony actually understood, it looks like, that the HDMI situation is not great because they have, from what I've seen, they have a like a clamp that you can get that kind of keeps the HDMI cable from getting disconnected. With an SDI, you never have this problem, but with HDMI, you do. This is why I don't like HDMI for this kind of thing, for doing external recording, because it can get unplugged and it's just not really made for the kind of things you do with production. So it's more of a consumer electronic cable for just, you feed it into a monitor and then that's it. So now we have this whole thing where, Atomos has whole products where they kind of rely on this HDMI out and in kind of thing. I would rather have it where SDI was cheaper or like some other way. Like even if somebody has to make up some kind of newfangled idea for a connector that's not HDMI because it's just not very reliable. And I've had it happen where HDMI cables just stop working like that, where I never had that issue with SDI ever. So also, like if you don't have a clamp to clamp down that HDMI cable, it can come unplugged really easily. So if you're going to do that, make sure that you secure all of your cables. So the other thing is, like, in my opinion, like I probably would not buy this camera if I expected to have like a 16-bit raw signal going out. This is not the kind of camera I'd get for that. If I was getting that kind of camera, I'd rather get the pocket cams, like the Pocket 4K and 6K cams, or a number of other products that are, I think, have more features that I think are video centric or cinema centric than what this camera does. To me, this camera is ideal for when you strip down and you're only using like the body and a lens and maybe some filters on the front, but like, you know, adding a matte box to it, adding like, you know, I saw an image of a guy shooting with it, and then they had like a little thing that had their monitor to record like ProRes or RAW or whatever, and I'm thinking that gets heavy. If you're, you know, holding it like this, that gets heavy after a while, and I wouldn't want that, to be honest. You know, and I actually think that with handheld video, a better way to shoot it, this is my experience, is when you have 3 points of contact, you put it up to your face and you put your eye in the viewfinder, or you have a top handle and you kind of go low with it. When you start, you know, holding it like this, like, it's weird to me. Like, I can't hold a camera like this, and, you know, I can't do that. Maybe it's just me. But this way of doing it, you get that viewfinder up in your eye. You block out any glare, so you can't complain that the screen is not bright enough. And you have 3 points of contact to help steady your shot. Makes a lot more sense to me than holding it like this and like looking at the monitor, or holding it out away from you and looking at the monitor. It just makes no sense to me. I would have a really hard time shooting that way. Okay. But I kind of come from a news background where I use shoulder mount cameras a lot. So, you know, that kind of thing is just not, it's not my thing. So for me, this camera probably best stripped down to like its bare bones, lens, body, and that would make it great. Maybe a top handle on it. You know, I think that would be great. If I was using this cam also for like news gathering, again, if I was using it for, I think it would be perfect for the kind of news gathering that I see now, where it's just someone goes out with a camera and quickly grabs whatever they can, especially at like conventions and that kind of stuff. This would be great for that. And when you're doing that, I would still think it'd be awkward to hold the camera out from your body like that and then have like an external recorder and be shooting ProRes or something. That would be weird. I would just use just the bare bones. And since the battery life is 2 hours, you won't even need to change out the battery too often. So I think that's great. So I guess with that, I just, to my opinion, I just wouldn't use the HDMI out for RAW. That's just my thing. Also, let me get a drink. Also, for this, the ProRes RAW, from my understanding, still isn't supported in Resolve, so I wouldn't use it for that anyway. It would basically give you ProRes options, so I just don't think it would be worth it at that point. So yeah, overall thoughts on it. A great camera for low-end projects, especially for handheld video. That's more and more commonplace. It's not too expensive. I saw someone complain that it was too expensive. No, it's not for what it does. And the size, like, that's the thing, is that you can really strip that thing down. The Pocket 4K, it does a lot of really nice things, but it doesn't have half the features that this does. And they're two products made for completely different things. Okay. So if you're comparing like the price of the Pocket cams to this, they're different products going for different markets. Okay. So they're not really comparable, but if you were, as far as the price is related, but if you would be hard pressed to find a camera that's doing what it's doing and doing it well, compared to like the Canons that are overheating and some other ones. So yeah. And also, I know some people complain about the Sony ecosystem, but there's a lot of really nice lenses and stuff that they have for their products as far as video is concerned that are great. So I personally do not care that it's a large format full frame sensor. I do not care about that. If that's your thing, that's fine. I don't have any I don't have any problem with that. But just keep in mind that the classic films that a lot of people love is shot in Super 35. It's not shot in large format. So it's not that using a bigger sensor is going to make your work look better. It'll only look different. Okay. If your idea of shooting, a piece that looks like a classic film that you really love, like if you're trying to make it look like, I think really most projects that you've ever seen that are older, that you're buying vintage glass for, are not shot in large format. That's all I'm saying. If you're going to get the lenses for it, why are you shooting a different format? Doesn't seem to make any sense to me. G Master lenses are pretty expensive, but there's a lot of third-party lenses that work really well on the system. If it were me, the Tamron 28-75 would probably be the lens I would get for doing most stuff. It's not a cine lens, but I wouldn't care because autofocus, like I wouldn't get the A7S III if I was planning on doing manual focusing because it has an autofocus system. So it's just kind of, and the 28-75 is a really good range. I think 24 is too wide for video, to be honest. If you need wider, probably get a wider lens, like a wider zoom that covers a larger range, because that'll be for other things. But to me, usually 24 is just way too wide. The edges start to look really weird. That's just my opinion. Let's see here. Oh yeah, and there's also these power zoom lenses that I wanted to mention. There's a 28-135 f4. If you're not familiar with that, I really recommend that if you're getting this A7S III and you have no other Sony lenses and you want to do video, just take a look at that 28-135 f4. Just look at it. I think that's a really nice lens for that system. If you don't want to have like a shorter, if you need to have like a dual zoom, that 28-135 looks like a real deal. For the price especially, it's not bad. Comments about color science. I keep seeing this and it frustrates me. With color science, as long as there's enough information in the file and you know how to color correct, the color science isn't going to be a problem with this camera. Okay. So, people complaining about that, just wait until you have the actual files to look at it and work with it and actually make sure you have color checkers so you can know if the color science is good or bad. Okay. Before anybody's had it in their hands, as far as the people who like just hate the system because whatever, immediately bagging on the color science. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If a Sony camera with their bad color science was used to shoot something like the Queen, you have no complaints about color science because it can look great. Okay, the Queen looks better than any YouTube narrative I've ever seen. So, and that's shot on Sony products. So I don't want to hear that kind of stuff. Okay, so unless someone can prove that you can't color correct the color science that you're fed from the files to look right, I don't really want to hear that. Okay, it's just, you probably don't know. And it's fine if you've heard that before. And I've complained about the 8-bit 420 files I have gotten from Sony products because they do some weird things. But that's not a 10-bit. That's not a 10-bit file. And this is a different camera, and they're using a different kind of color science with it. So it should probably help. So, again, I understand you might have your biases or whatever because you've used Sony products before. I've had that too, but 10 bit's 10-bit, depending on the kind of codec it is, depending on how much you can work with it, is different. I've had problems with Panasonic products in the past where orange skin tones were a huge problem. And then with the GH5, with the codec that they had, it could be fixed without much of an issue. So, I just don't really want to hear all that kind of, stuff. Just wait until we see it. If you have access to some footage that has color checkers or something that looks like something I would, be able to see in a normal day, has skin tones in it, all that kind of stuff, please send it to me and I can, work with it and give you my analyses of it. But, until we have that, or until I have that, I can't say anything bad about the color science. Can it work for stills? Depends on the product. I've seen there's a particular YouTuber that said, this isn't a hybrid camera. It's not, you can't really use it for stills. Just get one of these other cameras that shoot like 8-bit. Okay. Photography is a huge, vast variety of different things that you need for different purposes. For photography, a phone in the hands of a social media, what do they call them, influencer, makes more money than the most expensive camera you've got. Okay, so I don't want to hear that a camera that can shoot 12 megapixels with a 135 sensor can't be used for photography. I don't want to hear that because it's wrong. It depends on the product. Okay, this kind of stuff always depends on what you're doing. Okay, for web, which is the largest and most common way of delivering photography products, this 12 megapixels is perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. If you want to crop the hell out of your image, if you're shooting with the intent to always crop into where it's like, the size of the image ends up only being half the size, well then, you're probably not going to have that great a quality. But, considering that a lot of people have either HD or 4K monitors, which are 2 and 8 megapixels, it's like, is that really 12 megapixels is not enough for that? Most people are looking at stuff on one of these. Do you need a 50 megapixel sensor to create an image that someone's going to view on their phone? Seeing images on your phone is the most common way of seeing images. So, of course, 12 megapixels is enough for certain delivery or certain deliverables. For print, if you're shooting stills for print, that's also going to be dependent on how big, how much you're cropping, and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to leave it up to the print experts to talk about that. But what I do know is that even with smaller images that aren't huge in the megapixels, depending on how you process the file and prepare it for a print, some can look really good and others look terrible. For example, high pass filters for sharpening does amazing things to even really soft images. So yeah. So basically, of course, it can be used for stills. And anybody saying that it can't be used for stills doesn't really know what they're talking about. Or there's another reason why they're saying that. Of course it can. They need to be more specific, I guess, should be the thing. Best use of the camera, handheld video projects, I think. If you need a lot of maneuverability, you need a small footprint. If you're working by yourself and you're having a hard time keeping things in focus, you don't want to set up stabilizers. You don't want to set up or balance something on a gimbal or anything like that. Then this would be great for that. What's the worst use of the camera? Throwing it against the side of a building. Just kidding. It looks like a good all-arounder, but I would not use it for cinema. I've already seen people talk about like how they're going to rig it out for cinema uses. I don't really understand that. If it were up to me, and I was doing cinema, this is not the camera I'd get for that. It just isn't the kind of camera that I'd get for that. To me, this is like a multi-purpose video camera that can do the job that broadcast cameras should be able to do, basically for web work, things that are going to be basically distributed via Kaltura or YouTube or Vimeo, stuff like that. Vimeo or Vimeo, I don't know how to say it right. But that kind of thing, I think this is going to be perfectly fine as an A cam for that kind of product. It just will be. If people are able to use an old C100, which we do, to deliver products that are for learning video and are really on the higher end of what you get out of video products for learning, this will perfectly be fine for that and many other uses, including corporate video, corporate learning video, weddings, any of that kind of stuff. And again, if people were making a living shooting weddings, shooting corporate video, shooting any number of products with a Sony a7 III, an a7R2, a Canon 1DX Mark II, and of course I'm talking about video, not stills, Canon 1DX Mark II. If they were shooting with Panasonic GH5, there's no reason why this camera can't do it and probably do a better job as far as like what you get out of it. Honestly, there's no reason why it wouldn't. Is it better than the pocket cameras? These are questions that I have gotten, so that's kind of why I'm going through them. Is it better than the pocket cams? No, it's a different product. And you need to understand that something like a Sony a7S III and something like a Pocket 4K, they're different products for different target markets, okay? If you needed autofocus, if you needed in-body stabilization, if you needed the really low bit rate codecs, like those 10-bit H.264 codecs, for example, if you needed a Sony E-mount, these are all things that if you bought the pocket cams and you needed those things, you bought the wrong product. It's that simple. So they're just a different product that are really made for different groups that are making video. Yes, we all are doing video, but depending on the job you do will depend on what you kind of need. Kind of like if you're doing sports photography versus landscape photography, versus composite kind of photography, you're going to need different products, or you won't need certain products. A sports photographer is probably not going to be using a 5DSR. They're going to be using a camera that has really fast, reliable autofocus and is the most reliable camera they possibly can have to get the shots they need, right? It doesn't mean that the other cameras that are available are completely useless to people in a different market. It just means that each one has their own use. And for video production, it's the same thing. If you're shooting video production that's lower budget and it's for like a local cafe, and the only place that they're going to play their video is on Facebook or on YouTube or a deliverable medium like that, dude, you're not going to need a red helium. It doesn't mean that if you use a Sony a7S III for that, it doesn't mean that the red helium is a piece of crap. It doesn't mean that it's completely useless. It's just not for that kind of product. Okay. So you guys need to understand that. So if you're asking me, am I going to dump what I have to buy this? The answer is no. Just because I like bra. So it would be hard to leave that. So should I drop everything and buy one? If you're asking that kind of question, I would say no, unless you're suffering from these kinds of problems. Can you not keep a subject in focus? Do you have battery life issues? Is the size of your camera rig too big and cumbersome? Like somebody had told me through email that with their pocket camera that they had like a V-mount battery and like the rig just ended up being too heavy. It's like, yeah, if you're having those kinds of issues, like battery problems, then obviously, you should look at maybe getting a different product that will better serve your needs. If you need better handheld shots, like if you want my opinion, okay, the Pocket 4K, this camera is not a great handheld camera. It's just not. Even though it's got this thing over here to grab on with your hand, it's not a great handheld camera, not in my opinion. Okay, like I said before, I want 3 points of contact. There's no viewfinder on this thing. So, and there's no inherent shoulder mount. You'd have to like get one of those things where like you create a shoulder mount. I use this on a tripod and I like it because it has raw internal. That's why I like it. And yes, I shoot raw for corporate video type stuff because it takes out some work that I have to do that sometimes I forget. So doing white balance, for example, if you forget to do white balance, like I've done before, because if you're one person doing everything, you can forget that kind of stuff. If you're working with clients and all that kind of stuff, you might forget to do it. It can bite you in the ass later. So bra helps me with that. Anyway, if you have an old Sony product, then yes, this would be great because it's, if you have a Sony a7S II, then this is the upgrade. Obviously, this would be better. If you have overheating issues and you can't wait for an update to deal with it, like the new Canons, evidently, evidently that's worse than I thought. It's worse than I thought. I thought it was only when they were shooting 8K, but I guess it's with the super sampling in camera as well as causing overheating, that's not acceptable. That's not acceptable. Not from Canon. I can't accept that. So they need to fix that. I did see an article talking about how Canon was creating an adapter with a fan in it. That is not a proper solution, Canon. You need to fix this overheating issue. Either you need to do it with a firmware or you need to do a recall. Don't be like Sony and not fix it. That's not acceptable. Not acceptable. So a couple other things. One last thing before I get into this last part on this that is longer. I'll take a look at comments. But something that I saw already is bad comparisons. I saw a comparison of this camera to the Ursa 12K. That is a silly comparison, and it is not comparable at all. They're two completely different things. If you want to compare like the image quality, I guess that's fair, but they weren't doing that. What they were doing was comparing like, the use of the files, like 4K versus 12K, but they're completely ignoring the body size, lack of autofocus in one of them, lack of a ton of features in the Ursa, in favor of just shooting a higher resolution. That's not acceptable. That's a bad comparison, horrible comparison. So when you're seeing stuff like that, please be smart and, think about the comparisons that people are doing and make sure that they make sense. Like if it doesn't make sense to you, it's probably not a great comparison. Okay, so let's see what's going on in the chat. Oh, there's not a lot. Please ask questions or else this is going to be really boring. Please ask questions. Let's see here. Yeah, so just in case people didn't know and are entering, because I'm seeing we have more people now. I was talking previously about how my opinion and my experience has been that the advice that I see a lot on YouTube specifically, I think is the wrong kind of advice when it comes to how to get work. My opinion is that if you're spending a lot of time developing a reel and you're spending a lot of time developing a like a website and all this kind of stuff, like I'm not saying don't do those things, but if you're spending a lot of time and you're wondering why people still aren't contacting you for work, there's a lot of reasons for that. And the easiest and cheapest way, in my experience, to get work is to meet the people who hold the purse strings, the people who spend the money, the people who make the decisions on who gets a project. Those are the people you need to get to know and make it clear that they will best work through you, because if you get along socially, you'll probably get along with work. And I know it doesn't always work that way. But generally when it comes to getting work, it's a lot easier when you just know the right people. It's a lot easier, and that's how Hollywood works. Hollywood does not work based on merit. It works based on who you know and how much power you've got and how much sway one person has to get products over from one person to the next. If you ever wanted to challenge me on that, just read the names of people who are involved in projects, and you will often see, especially in mid-tier stuff, you'll see like the same last names popping up. Okay. So, and even when you don't see that, there's a lot of people who have connections with other people in Hollywood that help them get the jobs. It's a friend, it's a relative, it's an aunt, it's an uncle, it's a father, it's a brother, it's a grandfather, it's a whatever. Often it's just friends. And my experience is, and always has been, that to get work, it doesn't matter if it's in news, it doesn't matter if it's in independent filmmaking, it doesn't matter if it's in Hollywood, it doesn't matter if it's in anything to do with production. If you know people, it's a lot easier to get work. And I was just talking about this like recently, and I got a request to work on a project with a very high profile client that has nothing to do with anything they've ever even seen me do. It has nothing really to do with that. It's just the people I know, and the people I know, and the people they know, and just know that I do particular work. So, the connections you have are far more valuable. They're going to be far more valuable in the short and long term than any reel you put together or any website you put together. Okay. So DJ was just responding in how he got this project, this possible project that we may be working on. It's just because we know a guy. Like, we seriously know this guy, and he knows everybody. Like, that guy that he knows like everybody. It was weird because the first time I met him, he already knew who we were. It was a weird situation. Photographic Element says, news gathering, need audio module, glasses help 3-point contact. Yes. That audio module looks really, really interesting. And I'm very curious to see how it works. I've never used that, but it looks so similar to any other top handle kind of like audio thing. Like, if you use the Canon cinema cameras, they have a similar thing. And those work really nice. So I like it because it looks so compact. It looks really, really cool. Is there more about 16-bit RAW? The 16-bit RAW that you're going to be getting from that camera, it probably will end up being, if it's ProRes RAW, I'm not sure how they do it, but usually if it's 16-bit linear, it's going to be a lot of information that you don't really need in there. Usually the 12-bit log, the 16 to 12-bit log encoding, and then it unpacks in 16-bit is what you'd rather have. So I don't really know. But for the external, it looks like you can do it through Atomos. And I think they had a thing that was done by Philip Bloom, if I remember correctly, where he shot in ProRes or ProRes RAW. I'm still not impressed by anything that I've seen out of that, but it's probably just the content that I didn't really like. DJ says, I believe The Lighthouse was shot on vintage film and cameras and was a square format. Yeah, they used a lot of vintage stuff for that. I haven't seen it yet. I really need to see it. But yeah, the really old formats were like different aspect ratios, and also shot at a different frame rate too. The really old stuff. That's why it looks weird to us when we play it back in 24 FPS. Photographic Elements. I love that lens at 28 to 135. Yeah, it's a good lens from what I've seen. 28 to 135 f4. It's it's got like a power zoom module on it. It has that for that sensor size. For a 135 sensor, 28 to 135 is great. Emotion VFX. Thanks for the super chat. Thank you so much. €2. Thank you so much for that. That's really kind of you. The 28 to 135 is really great. There's an APS-C version of it. I think it's 18 to 115 or 18 to 105. That's great too for Super 35 or APS-C. But those are good. Those are good lenses. Like, I like those all-in-one lenses. I think those are really great. If you do a lot of standard production stuff and you don't need anything exotic, they work great. Vimeo. Okay, thanks for Photographic Elements. I had no idea how to say that. And the C100, the old ones, so C100 Mark I are what we use. Zeke says, I'm looking at buying a wireless lav system on the lower budget end, kind of like the Road Link. Any recommendations? My opinion, Zeke, is to not get low-end wireless lav systems. The only brands I really trust when it comes to audio are like Sennheiser and Sony, to be honest. The Rhodes, I'm not, I don't, I don't go there. It could just be that I'm a brand snob. I'm totally, I'm totally willing to admit that. But I've used tons of audio products in the past, and Sennheiser has been the brand that's never let me down. And they have really, really great audio products. So that's my opinion, Zeke, on that. And then Sony audio systems I've used a lot of. As far as the Rode stuff, again, like I don't use them enough, but wireless is one of those things where you need to make sure you get a good system. The cheaper systems that you have to know that if they're cutting costs, you want to know where they're cutting the costs. And wireless systems, even wired systems, where they cut the cost is not in places that you want. Your audio needs to be really, really good. Your audio needs to be good in order for your product to be good. A7S3 versus DV tape. I don't know what you mean. I think you're joking. Steve says, okay, I was just really listening. Good stuff so far. Thank you. No problem, dude. And I'm glad you're able to make it. I know it's hard for you because you're in, I think you said you're in Australia. It's about transferring an edit from Premiere to DaVinci and proprietary internal edit tools on Premiere, transferring to do a color edit. You're doing a why? So okay. So here's what I think you should try, Steve. Your understanding is that the proprietary edit tools like Stabilization won't be understood by DaVinci. Yeah, if you're doing here's what you can do. And you should be able to do this. Just do your color grade in Resolve and save out a LUT and throw it in. Shouldn't that work? That way you get, the color grade in there. So let me know if that doesn't work. And then if I don't usually do this kind of like thing where you transfer files from one project to the other like that. And this just might be my old school way of thinking. But when I do edits and color correction and stuff, I'm doing it I'm using like two different things. Okay. So like the edit goes in like one project, like say Premiere or whatever, and then the color grade will be somewhere else. And if I need to relink my video files, in Premiere to the graded the graded video, then so be it. Like I would rather do it that way than doing this round tripping kind of thing. I just don't do that because I tried it with Adobe, even Adobe with its own Premiere to After Effects and to sound booth kind of stuff. It was causing errors, and I haven't done it since because it was a huge hassle. So that's my opinion. If you're doing stuff like Stabilization, proprietary edit tools, yeah, I mean, if it's something that doesn't translate over to Resolve, then it's not really going to work for you. That's just my thing. So you should be able to save out a LUT. Let me just see real quick. Yeah, you should be able to create a LUT in Resolve and import them into Premiere. Just do that for your color. Yeah, I'm seeing this. Like, there should be other videos about how to do it. That would be the fix. Honestly, just do the color grade and then save a LUT. And then you have the stabilization and everything all done in Premiere still. Does that help? Let me know if that doesn't help. See you later, DJ. Photographic Element says, I like the mini doc from Cinema 5D shot in A7S3. I'm not sure which one you're talking about. Electrotronic Love Sennheiser AVX is cool for one person, including limiter. Deity copies A10 and other major brands. Yeah, yeah. If that helps, Zeke. Steve says, "Cool. That sounds like good road. I'll give it a go." Yeah, Steve. All you have to do for that to work, you do your grade right in Resolve, and then make sure you're working in DaVinci WireGB. Make sure you're working in DaVinci WireGB and you're not doing color management, because it won't save the LUT right. It'll save it. It'll only save like your nodes. So when you do your grade, okay, and then you right click the thumbnail, and then you can save a LUT out. You save a 3D LUT out of that, and that you should be able to import and use that in Premiere. So generally, like how we did it in VFX was for like these higher end movies. You don't use a LUT for VFX or anything else. You don't use that one LUT for every shot. Each shot, not each cut, but each shot gets its own LUT. So that's what kind of sucks about that. That's why for me, when I do that, and I'm like, say, doing my color grade in one and I'm editing in something else, I will render graded intermediate files, and then I will just relink to those, and that does the job, because then you're just using the new stuff. And also, if let's say the source footage was like raw, or it was H.265 or something that's taxing on your computer, you can save out as a DNxHR file or a ProRes file, and then it runs a lot faster for your editing. Pascal says, "Hey, my friend, did you talk about what we talked about in the email? If so, I'll start streaming again." Let me see. What did you say to me? Let me just check. Oops. Pascal. Let me just check in here real quick. I don't remember. So you asked me, what do I think of the new A7S III? I did a whole thing about that. Gerald Undone did a great video. Yeah, I agree. I think he has the best video on it, on the A7S III, in my opinion. He said it has real 13 to 14 stops dynamic range. Usually the advertised is like their testing, which is usually going to favor more. But I think he used one of those charts with the looking like a sound thing on it to check it. So yeah, as long as his testing was good, then yeah. Should you sell your Pocket 6K for it? It depends on what you're doing. I think I gave you an answer on that. I said I would argue that the Sony is better compared to the Pocket 6K if you're struggling to maintain focus, you do a lot of handheld video, find yourself running out of battery, or you're having infrared pollution issues, which I forgot to mention earlier. But I think the Pocket 6K is better on IR, but that is one issue that I've seen with people who are using the Pocket 4K is infrared pollution and not using filters for that. My opinion is that the image out of the Pocket 6K is absolutely gorgeous. So I would have a hard time getting rid of that. I would say if you had the money, get like one of the cameras for one type of product, and then you get the Sony for a different kind of product. That's my opinion. And then you said that your concern is that the Pocket 6K lacks in dynamic range. I think the dynamic range in the camera is actually pretty good. So I'm not sure what you're shooting. And you talked about using V-mount batteries. If you're using a V-mount battery, excuse me, if you're using a V-mount battery for that and you're trying to do it like either handheld or you're doing it like on a gimbal and it's like just way too heavy, then then that might not work for you because it's an ergonomics problem. So if you're worried about the colors of the Sony, it's going to depend. I think personally that thank you, Photographic Elements, for the super chat. Thank you very much. It was very generous of you. For the A7S III, what was I saying? So with colors, yeah, that's right. So the thing is with Blackmagic Raw, with when you're shooting with the Blackmagic Raw, the thing is that what you're not going to have when you shoot with the Sony, whether it's with ProRes Raw or with its or if it's in the 10-bit internal codecs, you're not going to have that highlight recovery tick box that you see in the Raw options. That tick box will give you a little bit extended dynamic range in your highlights, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I've actually, especially since using the Red Eye PP2 mapping, have never had an issue with artifacts out of that little tick box. But what that thing does is it kind of extends your dynamic range a little bit by sampling from the channels that didn't get clipped. So it's worked really well for me. I don't shoot the kind of products where I need a super, super high dynamic range for it to work. So I think it just depends. If I remember correctly, Pascal, some of the stuff I've seen from you, you're shooting outdoors where there's like a sun kind of in the shot. I'll be honest with you, the stuff that I saw from you, even if there's clipping in the highlights, I don't care because they look gorgeous anyway. And that was I think it was with a Fuji X-T3. So like, honestly, the dynamic range issue, like if you're having problems with dynamic range, I haven't seen it in your footage, so I'm not sure. But I wouldn't worry about it that much unless it really, really bugs you. So with the Pocket 6K, I would argue that I've seen more than enough products that take place in a very high dynamic range situation where I would be pretty happy with it, but your expectations are probably different than mine. So as far as the Sony a7S III being lighter, as far as like what you'd need for it to really work, yeah. I mean, you'd basically be trading the convenience of Blackmagic Raw for the convenience of the body size, because you won't need to have a bunch of extra stuff for the battery life, and all those kinds of things. So there's like a convenience trade-off that you would have. For me and the stuff that I do, Blackmagic Raw is really hard for me to get rid of. So I'm kind of like a drug addict to it now. I really, really love it and I want to keep it. So it would be really hard for me to kind of go from using Blackmagic Raw to something else. That would be a very difficult transition for me. And it makes me nervous just thinking about it, because I'm forgetful about some things on set, about like with white balancing is the biggest thing. Like when I shoot in a mixed lighting situation, I've seen more than enough footage, even from professional videographers, where they forget to white balance it correctly. And you end up having to do a lot of fixing in post, and dealing with skin tones in those kinds of situations really sucks. So if you are very confident in your skills and you got that mental checklist and you never forget that kind of stuff, I do sometimes, then you're probably fine. Just keep in mind that 10-bit versus a raw codec, it's not going to be the same. It will not be the same. Even if the final images that you get out of the two cameras are the same, using them is different. Okay. And it's not to say that either is necessarily better or whatever than the other one. It's just with 10-bit, you have less information there and less control. So you really need to make sure you get it, exposed right, and you get it exposed right, and you get the white balancing and everything right in camera as much as you can, to make sure that you don't have problems later. Raw, like Blackmagic Raw or any other raw codec, doesn't matter if it's red code or whatever, affords you so many ways of screwing up and fixing it easily where it's not really a problem. So I like that kind of convenience. And I can understand why you might not care about it. But for me, that would be the thing. So really, it's up to you and what you find is going to be more important for the kind of stuff that you do. If the convenience of having it be handheld and all that is really that great, totally go for it, dude. I would probably not sell a Pocket 6K for it. I wouldn't sell it. I'd try to keep, the two products, because you might have different products that need different things. But, for the convenience of the A7S III, I would have a hard time passing it up. And then also, forgot to mention this, but, selling the Pocket 6K and whatever lenses you have for it is probably not going to cover the full cost of getting into that system. So even if you did sell your Pocket 6K and some lenses, you're probably not going to be able to buy that Sony camera and the lenses you need to do your projects just based on that. So it doesn't seem like it would be really a trade-in. It would be like, it would be an expense. I won't say an investment. It would be an expense. Oh yeah, unless you have, forgot to mention this, but with the E-mount, if you're using EF glass or Nikon F glass, I think there are adapters for E-mount with Nikon F, but if you've got like SLR lenses and you want to take advantage of the autofocus, I think you should be able to do that. The only thing is, sometimes the autofocus through the adapters is shoddy. Like sometimes it is. And then usually the majority of the time, native mount lenses work better with autofocus features and that kind of stuff than adapted lenses. So if you're going to get, my opinion, if you're going to get the A7S III, especially like out of the gate right now, before adapter companies have a chance to update their firmware and everything to get their adapters working with the A7S III technology, I would recommend getting E-mount lenses for it. Probably more of the Sony ones or the ones that are known to work well with like the A9 or the A7 III and those kinds of cameras. Because just experience, usually autofocus is much, much better with native glass. Much better. Sennheiser XSWD lavalier system. I don't remember all these like particular names of stuff. So let me look real quick. Let me just look at this. Looks fine to me. I mean, the thing is that even if the like the numbers on stuff, let's say on your spec sheet for stuff like audio gear, okay, and this is only like I found this out a long time ago when I was talking to it was an ex-girlfriend, and she had a band, and one of the guys in the band had a company where he built XLR cables, and he built very, very high-end XLR cables that were made for audio professionals, and everybody was buying them that had the money. And he would replace the parts that were in the cable with the best quality products that he possibly could for the wires and all that, and the connectors and everything. So, even though you have like, I don't have one here like this, okay? Even if you have something like this, okay, this mini XLR to XLR connector, even if these had the exact same specs, and this was like an $80 version from a brand name that's well known and they don't fail, and there was a knockoff version of the exact same thing that had the exact same things on the spec sheet, but it cost $10, you have to ask yourself, what did they do to make it so cheap? Now, sometimes there's really no difference. Okay, sometimes there's no difference, and some people will be snobs about it. Okay, I may be a snob about audio gear, but what I know is that I've had audio gear that was cheap fail in the past, and I don't really trust it. The only product that really surprised me was the Tascam. Was it Tascam? No, it was a Tacstar SGC something or other. And every review I'd seen of it said that it was just as good, that the audio quality was just as good as the Rode VideoMic Pro. I bought it as a backup to my Sennheiser, and it actually works incredibly well. I'm really surprised at it, but the build quality is trash. The build quality on it is like, if that thing fell to the ground, it would break. So, and mics, I've had Sennheiser mics and Shure mics and Sony microphones that have taken beatings and have never failed. I've had mics from some other brands that I won't name that failed horribly. There's one brand, I like the Sonys, but there is a mic that we have from Sony that's not too great either. So, they have mostly good products, but that particular one's not great. It's an older model that they don't even make anymore. But for the other thing is for if you're doing wireless mics for the lavs, make sure that the receiver is really good and robust. Like, you don't want to get one where the antenna or whatever are really flimsy, because when you go to store those, or if you have like one on the transmitter, if the transmitter has like really fragile parts, you remember that you're going to be like putting that on and taking that kind of thing off of somebody a lot, and they might drop it, or they might you might end up having to put it on in a weird way where things get bent. And I've never had it where a Sennheiser system gets messed up from that kind of work. They're robust and they last. Sony's mostly are like that too. One of the Sonys that I have, it's just the mic itself is not wonderful, but it's been used for like 5-10 years, and there's no actual mechanical problems with it at all. It just works. It's kind of like Canon cameras. The Cine cameras in particular, like Canon Cine cameras, even though they cost a lot, and they cost more than a lot of other brands, I've never had a quality assurance problem with them. And they just work. Like, they work really, really well. So I don't have a whole lot of negative things to say about those cameras, because they just work incredibly well, and they're like a workhorse kind of thing. And if you're going to be buying audio gear, especially, you want to get really good quality stuff. And then if you get cheaper stuff, use that as a backup. I wouldn't buy one of those as your main tool. Like, backups are fine if you get the cheaper ones, but for your main audio stuff, you want to spend money on that. You want to make sure that it works right. In my opinion, that's what I would do. It's more important that you get good audio gear than a number of other things. So Pocket 6K is around 12, and they say the Sony is around 14 when tested. Will that be a huge difference? Pascal, in my opinion, not really. I don't think you'll see that. I don't think you're going to see that much of a difference in the dynamic range. I really don't think you're going to see that much of a difference. I know it feels like a lot, but you have to look at the kinds of products that people are able to make with stuff that has less dynamic range than that, and ask yourself, if you can't get at least that good with 12 stops, how come they were able to do it with 10? So there's a lot of things that you can do to artificially expand the dynamic range of your camera. And one of the best ways to do that is to plan your shot and, use your light to your advantage. People have used graduated ND filters and a number of things to deal with dynamic range problems, but I don't think it's that much of a problem. I think it's great that there's more dynamic range in the Sony. That's awesome, but I don't think that for most products people are going to really care that much. I don't think so. Considering Rec 709 is much, much smaller than 12 or 14 stops, as long as the scene has a super high contrast, then you're probably fine. So I'll do the last bit of this real quick. So yeah, so these are a couple things that I wanted to talk about with this while we're, the last thing. So there was something that was written by somebody that looked like they were upset by the A7S III, and I was sent it, so I'll just talk about that. The first thing that they were talking about was resolution, and this is where they were comparing like 12K from the Ursa to the 4K in the Sony. You can't really compare those things. 4K is more than large enough to do a huge amount of cropping for 2K and HD products. The other thing is that resolution and megapixels are not always the exact same thing. You can have two products that are both the same size, like they're the same number of pixels, but the resolution, like the actual sharpness of the image, is totally different in between the two of them. Even if you have sharpening turned completely off, it's how they render the image. So, for example, the Pocket 4K, it's pretty soft. Like, honestly, compared to a lot of other cameras that have 4K images, it's pretty soft. So, A7S III is going to have more than enough resolution, I think, for most products, which are usually HD. HD 2K is still the vast majority of deliverable size for products, especially the kind of products that I would think you'd make with this camera. The pricing, they were complaining about G Master lenses. Yeah, but there's also third-party lenses. Like I think I said before, the Tamron 28-75. It's a really good lens and not $3,000. And there's plenty of other lenses also that are in E-mount that are great. It has a pretty big collection of lenses now made for it, even from third parties. So you have a selection of a bunch of stuff. The price and also the price of the camera, you can't go and say, well, 12K or 8K or whatever is so much better out of these cine cameras that cost like over $10,000. And then, compare that to the price of a, $3,000, $3,500 SLR style mirrorless camera. It's just not the same thing. They were complaining about that the CF Express slot was in there, and they were complaining about it like, why would you buy that? And it's like, dude, you can use a UHS-2. You can use the UHS-2 cards in there. So I'm not sure why you would complain about having the option to use multiple card types. Like, I don't get that. Maybe somebody can explain to me why it would make sense to, like, you can use UHS-2, which should do the job for the internal recordings of the camera, but you're complaining that they've added the ability to use these new CF Express cards that are really, really fast. It could be that there's going to be a rollout in the future of something that might need that data rate to be that fast. I don't know. Could be. I just don't know why you would complain about that. Just don't buy it. Like, if you don't like the CF Express cards, just don't buy them. You use UHS-2 cards, no problem. The audio, they were complaining that they were complaining about the audio input, and my opinion is that the audio input for this camera is pretty much standard. I don't think you really need an XLR input on a camera like this. To be honest, because I don't think that the kinds of products that this camera would be used for really requires that. And if you're doing cinema production, you're probably going to be inputting the audio into an external recorder anyway. So I don't really understand what they were complaining about or why they were complaining about that. They were saying that stills it's not really like a proper amount of megapixels. And like I said before, dude, 12 megapixels works perfectly fine for the largest amount of deliverable images, which is through the web. So it works perfectly fine for that. They're complaining about in-body stabilization, and it's like, well, of course they're going to put that in the camera because their consumers like it. So, and they were complaining that it made like lenses were not having an image stabilization. They were like favoring IBIS, so it like was making lens manufacturers be cheap about it or something. I just don't agree with that. I get why he would infer that, I guess, but that seems like a pretty big claim that I don't think is backed by anything. That's just lens manufacturers, I think, would rather make high-end glass that works really well and has good image quality rather than have to develop image stabilization at the same time, don't you think? So, and usually on the longer lenses that the IBIS doesn't really work great for, they add image stabilization anyway. They're complaining about Cinetone. I don't know why he was complaining about that. Just, change. If you don't like that color science, you change it. Not really that big of a deal to me, but I guess for some people it is. And then they had a backhanded compliment about minimum ISO, like having a really low ISO that you could pick from it. I'm not sure why they complained about that either, but they did. So, yeah. So last few questions, if you could. I know it might sound like I'm Sony fanboy, but I'm not. I'll probably never have the camera in my hand. I just try to be a little bit more objective about this kind of stuff. Steve asks, the two cameras I'm using is the Blackmagic 4K. I'm assuming the Pocket 4K. You mean, because the Blackmagic cinema camera 4K is different. And the Fuji X-T4, would you have an observation about lenses presently for interviews mainly? Steve, could you do me a big favor? I would really appreciate this. I've seen a bunch of complaints about the Fuji X-T4 and the image quality or the colors in tungsten light. If you could please send me, and I know this is a big ask, but just for my sanity, I would really like a sample of a person and a color chart, preferably the X-Rite, something like this. You can just use something like this, okay? If the image even just looks like this, okay? Just, oops, I have it upside down. Send it to me like this. You have skin tone, you have something like this in the shot, and use tungsten light, and then in one shot, and then daylight in another shot. So 3200 Kelvin and 5500 Kelvin, around there. Oops. If you could send me a shot of that, I would really appreciate it, because I really, and shoot it in the 10-bit Fuji log. Okay, shoot it in FLOG. Email me. Please email me if you don't understand or you need more clarification. I would love to have that. I've asked for it before, and I don't think anybody really had an X-T4. If you have that, I would really appreciate it, because I want to debunk this if I can debunk it. So I've been really wanting to debunk that for a while. So please, please, please. Thank you in advance. Would you have an observation about lenses presently for interviews? For interviews, I have a Fuji camera right now. I'm using, what's the name of this? Yeah, it's a Fringer EF FX adapter with the Sigma 18-35 f1.8, and I use a 50-100. Those lenses are what I use on my Fuji cameras, because the Fuji lenses are a little expensive. In my opinion, if you're doing headshots, the 56 1.2 is pretty awesome. The unfortunate thing is, like, Sigma created some really great primes for the Fuji camera, not for Fuji, but for other mirrorless cameras, but not for Fuji, if I remember correctly. I would have mentioned those because they're great lenses, but I don't think they made a Fuji X mount version. But the Fuji 56 is really good, and the 23 f1.4 for image quality, in my opinion, those two lenses are the two lenses to have for IQ on that system. Just my opinion, as long as you don't have to worry about manual focusing too much, and the autofocus works fine. If you're worrying about autofocus, or if you're worrying about manual focus, with that, it's the, was it not 18-50, it's 16-55. I think it's called the teacup lens, that big honking beast. 16-55 2.8 is a good one. Yeah, because once you go out to 55 on that at 2.8, it should be fine. The only thing is that that lens is a little heavy compared to a lot of other lenses. If you want to go native mount, I think that 16 to 55 is a really good one. And then if you need a good all-purpose, that 16 to 80 Fuji f4 is another one to consider. I haven't used that one, but that's the kind of lens that I would use for general photography and videography. I know that they're boring. Like a lot of those lenses don't have the greatest bokeh. They don't have, they tend to be slower, but I'm more of a practical person, and I prefer using zooms. I prefer using zooms over using primes. So the only thing with that 16 to 80, if you get that, my opinion is that if you get that lens, you get that for your general coverage, and then you're going to want one exotic kind of lens to cover your headshots that you want that really, really shallow depth of field for. If it's native mount, it's that 56 1.2, because you should be able to like set it and forget it. Like at probably set it at like an f2 and just kind of leave it there. That is a really, that 56 1.2 is really gorgeous. It's a really good looking lens, and for headshots it's great. The only thing is for manual focus it's crap. The 23 1.4 is better for manual focus because it has a clutch focus mechanism on it. Yeah, so that's what sucks about the Fuji system is the native mount lenses. You're mostly going to be in the Fuji, which are good. They're good lenses. It's just like for price, it can be hard. Like for pricing, it can be very, very difficult in the Fuji system because like you really only have one choice. And then sometimes there's like, you want like a certain focal length that they're just haven't gotten around to making. When they made that 16 to 80, I was like, that would probably be what I would get. I always think if you're worried about doing headshots only, you want an exotic lens to wow people, because when you throw the background out of focus and you have the bokeh balls and all that for corporate video and for headshots and for interviews, that can go a long way. With narrative, slower lenses should be perfectly fine. And for coverage, like if you're doing you need an all-purpose kind of coverage lens, that 16 to 80 should be great. That would be my opinion. So, cool. Let me see if there's any more here before I leave. Pre-ordered A7S III and now doubting. I have a bunch of Sony glass, but in love with the Pocket 4K. Do you think A7S III picture is worth it? Vladislav Kuzumchik. Sorry if I can't say your name. The Fuji MK zooms they're great, but they're expensive. I haven't used them either. The two cameras so with the A7S III is the picture work that if you're buying the A7S for the image quality, I don't think it's worth it, because at the end of the day, the image quality that you get out of your camera has a lot more to do with you than it does with the camera. If the reason why you can have a filmmaker shoot with a cell phone and it looks decent is because the filmmaker probably knows what they're doing, and then they have infrastructure set up to help deal with any problems that is with the compression or the noise or whatever's going on with the cell phone footage. So when it comes to looking at the cine reels that people are doing with the Sony A7S III, I would not use that as a benchmark of anything. Those are an example of what the filmmaker can do, not really an example of what the camera can do. Okay, I really want to make sure that you guys understand that. You could put into the hands of those filmmakers any other camera with a set of lenses, and they'll probably get similar looking products because they would know how to shoot it and give you only the best footage. The thing that's important is whether or not the specifications and the design of the camera and what it's made for is going to work for you or if it won't. Okay. My opinion is that with the A7S III, if you need to have that autofocus technology, if you need that in-body stabilization for your lenses, probably if you're adapting lenses that don't have IS, or if you're using certain Sony lenses, if you like the Sony ecosystem, then that would be a reason to get it. What's the other thing? If you need, super low light, I'm talking about no light in your shot. Like you need to plan on having absolutely no control over lighting, and you're going to shoot in situations that are completely like not predictable. Then I would say that the Sony is a fine camera to get. If you're putting the camera on a tripod, you're using stabilizers, you're using manual focus because you don't want to use autofocus. You like using Blackmagic RAW, and if you use the A7S III and you think that ProRes RAW is going to work, from my understanding, ProRes RAW still does not work in Resolve. So if you use Resolve, then that's not really going to be a good time to do it. So yeah. You ordered it because you have lenses. So yeah, you already have lenses for it. That's fine. The 4K, almost everything shoots 4K now. Full frame, my opinion is if you're buying it for the format, that's not a good reason to get it. The format is not going to make your footage look any better, guaranteed. The format is not going to make all of a sudden, if you shoot like average products, it's not going to all of a sudden blow people away. It won't do that. You'll get, if it's a depth of field thing that you're going for, use a longer lens, shoot wider. Okay. Usually if you're doing narrative, you need to stop the lens down, because if you don't, the depth of field is often too shallow to really get what's going on and have a proper look that is more, I guess, organic. Those kinds of things. Usually with a lot of narratives, especially the older stuff that a lot of people like, the lenses are stopped down quite a lot into the mid-range, and they're using Super 35 format. Super 35 is the standard. Full frame or whatever, like I think that if you're getting it for that, it's not really going to be as helpful to you as you might think. I just don't think it will. The potential raw output, it's going to be ProRes RAW currently, okay? If Blackmagic RAW comes out for it, it means that you would need to get the Blackmagic monitor, okay? You would need to get that for it. And then also, if it's only ProRes RAW, if that's all you get is ProRes RAW, and you use DaVinci Resolve as your grading software, you're not going to be able to grade in there until they update it to account for that. So that's something to think about. If you're having doubts, I wouldn't pre-order it. Like if you don't think that you want to have it, like if you doubt that you really want it, I would just not pre-order it. So that's my thing. The things that you're saying here, I just, I think if you already have the lenses for E-mount, that's all good. Like you already have stuff in it. It's just the full frame thing. I don't think that's a reason to get it. I really don't. And then the 120 FPS. There's a lot of cameras that can do high frame rate. So that's just my opinion, but I'm not sure what you shoot. Okay. For me, the Sony A7S III makes a hell of a lot more sense as a product that I would be interested in. If I wanted to shoot more handheld video, I wanted 10-bit instead of 8-bit. And I was doing a lot of stuff by myself where I didn't want to bring in tripods. I didn't want to bring in a monopod. I didn't want to use stabilizers, all that kind of stuff. For me, it's more of like a handheld video machine that to me, that makes the most sense for it. So that's what I got, folks. So we are at a little past 6:30 Pacific Standard Time. So sorry, I got a weird thing. So we're a little past, and I hope that you enjoyed this. And I will, $800 to $1,000 to get the Blackmagic Assist. If they do Blackmagic Raw, you're talking about, I think the camera's around $3,000 to $3,500. Dude, you're talking about up to $5,000 ish. Wait, no, four to $4,500 worth of stuff there. I mean, to get raw when there's plenty of cameras that are shooting raw now that don't cost that much. So, and you're gonna be using an external recorder. So that's what I got. I hope that you all enjoyed this. Live streams are every Wednesday, 4 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. The earlier you're able to show up, the better. Because I talk about a lot of stuff during these, and if I usually see a lot of people coming in at the end, and you're getting just the tail end. So I hope that you all enjoyed this, and I'll see you next week. So see you then. Thanks for coming.